All right, welcome to our podcast this morning. You know, it's interesting because I'm here with Sherry from the Women's Freedom Center, and it's been a couple of years that you and I, through the years, have talked about things going on at the Women's Freedom Center, and you always leave the studio, and I feel like, boy, there's so much more we could have said, and there's so much more we could talk about, and it's so tough because, you know, being on a music-driven radio station, we can't really spend an hour like we're going to do today with some of the things that you have coming up with the Women's Freedom Center, and we never get to have a very cool guest in studio too. So you brought a guest with us,
absolutely, for us
this morning. Who have you brought?
We have brought a fabulous. I'm going to use descriptions that she uses for herself.
Okay.
Kata Treesice. I'm saying it correctly.
So,
awesome.
Just so you know, I passed it to you because you get to say the last name. So. Sorry, I'm sly like that.
Well done. She is an artist, a musician, a coach, and this is my favorite part, a soul cheerleader. And she is a fabulous ally to the work of the Women's Freedom Center. And as you mentioned, we do have a number of things coming up in the next month plus. And one of them is a series that we call Flourish. And it's a creative workshop series for survivors of domestic and sexual violence. And Kata's going to get a chance to tell us a little bit more about how she's helping us host that. So it is fantastic to have a little more time. And I think also to broaden out kind of the spirit of the work that we do. Yeah. And this far end of the spectrum, because obviously, given the nature of our work, we sometimes talk about the crisis end of things to make sure folks know we're available for survivors of all genders, that end of things. But this is the flourish end and the freedom end of things and the amazing work that survivors themselves often do in terms of this movement. So thank you for the chance for that.
Well, you know, like I said, and I'm so happy that we're able to talk about what happens after you become a survivor and things improve in your life and in situations. And that doesn't get talked about as much because I think we're all worried about making sure that the awareness is there and being able to, not just the awareness, obviously, that people, the obvious parts of things, or what I consider obvious, but there's so much that people don't realize is happening in their relationships, in their lives, which is what we've talked about in the past, but we never really seem to focus on the good that comes out of the work that happens at Women's Freedom Center. So that's important. And I'm so happy we can do that today.
Yeah, thank you. And just, you know, we always like to just make sure for folks who maybe aren't as familiar, the Women's Freedom Center, formerly Women's Crisis Center, is the domestic and sexual violence resource organization for Windham and Southern Windsor counties. And we are committed to supporting survivors of all genders who've experienced domestic or sexual violence or sex trafficking. We know that it could happen to any human, and we are a 24/7 resource for them. And we've been doing this work in the community now for 48 years. We are not unique around the country. There are probably close to 2,000 similar organizations doing this work. So, you know, for all the progress we've made in our culture, obviously, and I would underline the fact that we're having this conversation with you on the air, that speaks to progress. But, you know, we all live in the same world with the same headlines. We still have a long way to go. So we appreciate chances to have these conversations.
For sure. And, you know, you are welcome for more because there's so much we could talk about. Kata, thanks for being here. We're so happy to have you there. And I know I am one of these people that if anybody has the talent to be a songwriter, to play an instrument, to be as worldly as you are, I get so inspired by him. I love seeing creative people be creative. So I'm very excited to see you. So thanks for coming.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
And so you've got 2 songs we're going to be hearing during our segment today, which is fantastic songs you wrote based on your experiences too, right?
Yeah. One is what I would call a recovery to gaslighting from an abusive relationship that I was in 6 years. And then the second one is more universal human experience song and just celebrating the fact that it's amazing that we're alive.
Right.
As intense as life is, it is a gift.
Yeah, it is true. It is so true. And being a survivor yourself, I'm hoping that this is going to be partly inspirational for others, you know, to see that there is that light at the end of the tunnel once you find the right tools to help you through it.
Yeah.
Which, of course, Women's Freedom Center is able to do. it sounded like off air, you and I were talking a little bit, and you're such a positive, happy person. And I can imagine that there was a time in your life where that wasn't the case. And now you've got this ability. What was the most shocking thing that you felt after you realized? Because you talk about gaslighting a lot. We'll get into that, I imagine. But when you had that moment of awakening and realizing, wait a minute, this relationship isn't what it seems to be, because that's what happens, right? You didn't know, right? You didn't really know.
Yeah, well, I'll just say the name of the song is "Giving Your Crazy Back to You," and
that speaks volumes, right there.
Yeah, and basically, what happened to me after this breakup, after the 6-year-long relationship, very complicated and ups and downs, and I at the end of it, I just felt like I couldn't feel myself. Like I'm like, where am I? And this question kept coming up, like, why do I feel crazy? Why do I feel crazy? Even though maybe on the surface it looks like a, standard breakup. Oh, he doesn't want to be with me anymore at that point, right? But I kept having that question, why do I feel crazy? And yet it didn't feel like it was me. And then I have a very dear friend and mentor who I was talking to one day after a long time of not being in touch. And I was talking to her about this, and she said, oh, well, you feel crazy because he was systematically abusing you through your entire relationship. And it was like the lights turned on after being in the dark in a very mucky, confusing, dark period. So it was then where she said that, because I had been having intuitions that, oh, this is unhealthy, this is abusive, the way that you're treating me is not okay, or these things that you did were scary and terrifying, but he would never admit it. I could never get any traction, right? And he would put it back on me that it was my fault. I was crazy. Right. So when she said that, it gave me the first foothold of recovery to go, okay, that is abuse. I can actually say, no, that you were abusive. Right. You are abusive. And that was this process of starting to give some of that back to him that he had slapped onto me over and over.
Sherry, is that typical? I mean, is her story kind of typical of what you're seeing at Women's Freedom Center?
Yeah, sadly, that is certainly one of the most, all the tactics can be insidious that an abusive person will choose to use. The gaslighting dial can be turned lower and higher depending on the connection. But the gist of it is exactly what Kara just said, right? And initially, what we need to keep in mind is that in a relationship that's abusive, nobody just starts out swinging on the first date, obviously, right? They would never get another date. So,
like divorce rates, right? When you look at divorce rates right now, it's over 50%. And I always kind of look at that and say to myself, well, wait a minute. These two, when they got married, I would imagine in most cases, not all, but I would imagine in most cases, when you start off getting married, happy, everything's great, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life with it. And then all of a sudden, you look at the divorce rate, it's like, wait a minute, close to 60%, and in divorce. And so I'm always fascinated with that stuff, because I'm thinking, what happened between I'm going to spend the rest of my life with this person to we're getting a divorce? Some of the stuff that can happen is exactly what she was talking about. Yeah,
and obviously, people that were in an initially healthy, okay relationship may also grow. There's also the other end of the spectrum, for sure, as we all know. But in an abusive relationship, it really starts to, go sort of, it crosses that line. And every situation is going to be different. Every person using abuse and every survivor may react somewhat differently. But basically, there starts to be a disconnect between the public or the presentation that the outside world potentially sees of that abusive person and what the survivor is now starting to realize, right? Because again, we don't fall in love with somebody that's abusing us right out of the gate. So absolutely, in the beginning, those relationships can start out awesome, right? All the adjectives that our culture teaches us, the soulmate, the sweep you off your feet, all the revved up energies, right? And so then, talk about whiplash psychologically to start to realize oh, wow, you've just said that to me, and the gist is, to encapsulate sort of gaslighting, initially in an abusive relationship, the person is working to gain the trust of the survivor, right? So the
Gotcha,
relationship will take hold. But then if gaslighting starts to take hold, it's to try to make the survivor not trust themselves, right? And if the abusive person can have any of us as the survivor start to question our own reactions, well, maybe I did do this, or am I somehow, like, if we can start to do their work of undermining ourselves in our own heads, wow, right? That can be a long, really delicate healing journey to sort out what was your crap,
Right.
and what maybe do I want to look at, right? Like, and that's a healthy impulse for any of us to at least examine things. But an abusive person will take that potentially healthy impulse to just look and see, okay, do I have a part in this? And just like avalanche, right? Like, oh, it's all your fault. It's all XYZ. And that's
Sure.
gaslighting.
Sure. Yeah, and that's why this whole month is so important with the with some of the programs you're offering here, because you're I don't want to use the word celebrating because it's a happy word. I don't like using those happy words, but I guess maybe we should, because you are kind of celebrating the fact that you ended up in a dark place with a relationship with somebody you trusted. That's the key, right? Because that's what happens. You trust this person. If you're in a relationship with somebody, I would imagine you trust them at one point. And so if, like you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it sounds like the technique here is to kind of break down your walls to the point where you have to believe in your abuser is, well, maybe, yeah, but he still loves me. He might have done this, but he still loves me because he said this. And now you're all of a sudden, the basis of who you are is gone because they've taken that away. And so to be right, I mean, and to be a survivor is when you kind of wake up like you talked about earlier. And that should be celebrated, I guess. Now that you talk about it, that should be celebrated, in a great way. So as we look at some of the programs you've got coming up, because I do want to talk about that, what are some of the, would you say is some of the most important ones in the series coming up? I mean, they're all important, but for somebody who is a survivor listening and they want to kind of learn more about flourishing or learn more about how to get past some darknesses that they've got, which ones are the most important in the series coming up?
I mean, it's a great question, and I'll just back up one more time just in case folks haven't had a chance to check this out.
Sure.
First of all, we will have a column coming out in the Reformer shortly, maybe even today. I haven't had a chance to look.
Nice.
But people can definitely check in with us, find out more by following the Freedom Center on Facebook, or just give us a call. Always welcome to do that.
Right.
Our office number is 257-7364 for any of the events I'm about to describe. I would say, first and foremost, anybody that has any concerns about the relationship that they're in can call our hotline too, right? Like the individual piece of that and the safety planning, they can talk one-on-one. And I'll just put our hotline number out there. That's 254-6954. That's 24/7 crisis hotline. So if people are having those moments as you're describing of like, something in this relationship is definitely feeling off to me, they can call us one-on-one. But as far as the events, so just to back up, first of all, April is Sexual Violence Awareness Month. But all the events that we have happening in April are open to survivors of all genders who've experienced domestic or sexual violence.
Right.
So this is what I'm about to describe. So the first, we're inviting folks to join us for something new that we're starting, and it's called the Survivor Outreach Collaborative. Again, all genders welcome. So for anybody that wants to use their voice and their ideas in our activism and our community education, we invite them to come learn more about some new volunteer options that we're creating at an informal Q&A session. It's happening on Zoom this first time out. Again, it's open to survivors across the spectrum, domestic sexual violence. And we'll be talking about that. And that is not just for helping with outreach, but it's also going to be just an ongoing group. There's going to be training provided,
Sure.
Some fun outings and things that we do as sort of group building. So it's just a great way for survivors who maybe are past that immediate crisis phase of their experience to stay connected, right? Because that's the most rewarding part of our work, I would say, is really getting to see survivors get through whatever's happened and reclaim their lives with this sense of promise and joy. And so this outreach collaborative is on the activism end. Right after that, and I want to give more time for Kata because this is what we're so excited about. And this is this Flourish workshop. And again, open to survivors across that trauma spectrum there. And it's called Embodying Our Voices. And, we consider this a lively 2-part music and movement session. Kata can say way more about that in a moment. But all genders, voices, bodies, and abilities are welcome to this series. And there will be other Flourish workshops in coming months. But this 2-part one, out of the gate, Kata is helping us start this off. And then the other thing that maybe we can talk about that's happening at the end of the month, we can talk about it maybe later in our session today.
Sure.
But it's we're calling it Circling the Light, and it's a solidarity bonfire. And this is open to all community members because this whole month we're really honoring resilience, I would say, if you come right down to it. The resilience of survivors that want to do activism, the resilience of survivors doing amazing art and healing like Kata's doing, and then the resilience of other social justice activists across all causes. So at the end of the month of April 28th, we're having a solidarity bonfire, and everybody's welcome. But let's save that. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Right. It feels like, and correct me again, Kata, but it feels like these kind of programs, as Sherry was explaining this, I was thinking about AA meetings for some reason. Mm-hmm. Because you feel like, okay, for alcoholism, let's just use that as an example. Once you recognize you're an alcoholic and you go to AA, you always have to go to programs. You always have to go to meetings because once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I'm starting to wonder if it's almost the same feeling for survivors too, right? Because once you're a survivor, you're doing well, you're flourishing, right? But yes, right, you don't just still need to have some sort of support system no matter what, because I can imagine that if you're somebody who's been through a lot, there's going to be moments of vulnerability and a support group is important. So things like this are part of that, right? That's what it sounds like.
Well, I can speak for myself.
Yeah.
I think that I personally feel as though I'm going to be in a long-term recovery, and I don't think that that's a bad thing.
Right,
I think it's a healthy, ongoing inventory of, how am I feeling? Oh, something about that interaction felt not right to me. I didn't feel respected. Oh, this is inventory for me to check in what's going on and to learn, I think, ongoingly how to speak up for myself. Especially with all the training that I've had and the kind of priming to be nice and keep things sweet and pleasant and so yes, coming out of this abusive relationship, I still irregularly feel as though I'm recovering from it, but I think it doesn't feel like a heavy weighted blanket. It feels like it's part of my story, and it's not going to keep me, like, it's enhancing my passions and my desire to want to live because I'm out of that prison, that particular prison of that relationship. And of course there's echoes and old remnants of, which actually of what it was like to be in there and to be told this or to have this belief about myself. And it's just an opportunity for me to keep shedding that and to remember who I am. So that's kind of my take on it, personally for me.
So are you a different person than you were then?
Yes.
Yes.
Woo! Yes.
I figured that would be the case. If you had the ability to talk to that person, what would you say?
Who was in the relationship?
No, to old Kata. To Kata from then, Kata that was in the relationship. What would you say to her if you had that ability?
To go back?
Yeah.
I would say you're not crazy. Trust your gut. You know what health feels like. You know what love, healthy love and connection and respect feel like. You can trust yourself. So,
and I'm sorry if I'm getting too deep here, but I have another question for you. Did you know that at the time deep inside? Like, was there a part of you that knew that, but you couldn't have the strength to get that out at the time? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I don't think it was about strength. I think I did know it was kind of like being haunted by a little voice of like, something about this isn't right.
Right. So you knew, subconsciously.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
and that's the part that got me out of the relationship eventually. I think that just luckily that part never abandoned me. That part that just said there's something not right, no matter how slick his arguments were, the ways that he would distort reality and paint these pictures and be a victim and show how much more he was hurting than me, blah, 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 blah. That, there was something in me, like a little voice that just that kept me awake to that part of myself that knew what a healthy relationship felt like, knew what a balanced relationship felt like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So,
I so appreciate and respect just the depth
For sure.
of the questions and absolutely just that phenomenal answer. And what I would say, going back to what you had asked a little bit earlier, I think, and what Kata just, underscored, really, I mean, every survivor's journey obviously is unique, right?
Sure.
There is no expectation on our part that survivors handle their healing journey in any particular way.
Right.
But every single one of us as a human, no matter what's happened to us, benefits from being connected, from feeling a sense of healthy abilities to say yes and no to things and having our boundaries respected and so in the same way, survivors may find it helpful, and the Freedom Center and lots of other organizations offer different ways to have support in our lives. And so for some survivors, checking in and having that support group is absolutely helpful. Others feel like, I'm looking back, that's in the rearview mirror now. And but the main thing is, like, whatever it takes for any one of us to feel like we are able to flourish in our lives, that can look infinite number of ways. So there's no, obviously there's no one way that survivors respond to the red flags that may be happening. And what I want to underscore here is that being in an abusive relationship and starting to see red flags, it's not about not seeing red flags typically, right? I mean, that can happen to any of us initially because we're so floored that it even happened. But by the time somebody has gone to the level where it starts to feel painful, either emotionally or beyond, it starts to get less easy, less safe to actually just walk out the door. Right.
Yeah.
And so that trajectory also looks very different. And the safety planning, I mean, this typically is not strictly a messy breakup, right?
Right.
Or just walking out the door sort of with you watching kind of thing. It's usually much more like fleeing. It's usually much more like, especially if somebody's actively worked to make us question our own reality, those reality checks from others that we love and trust can be enormously helpful. But there's nothing about individual survivors that makes them somehow different than any one of us if we were plunked into that same set of circumstances. It's just a matter of what the dynamic look like and what supports do we have to draw on in our outside world so that we can say, you know what, I'm done here. How do I safely back myself out of this? And that's what programs like the Freedom Center are here for. But where survivors go from there is really totally up to them, right? And thriving is totally part of the horizon.
Which is exactly a great segue into Flourish, because this is, we're almost professional here. It's great. So Flourish, which is this creative workshop series, and I know you're really excited about Akata, which is as creative as you are. I can imagine why. It's an empowering way for people, for survivors particularly, to really experience new ways of expressing themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say I believe we're all wildly creative since the day we're born until the day we die.
Boy, I hope so.
Oh, we are, buddy.
I hope so.
I'm telling you.
So.
Yeah, and I really believe in that, and our unique creativities is what makes the world grand.
For sure,
And so for me, I've always felt and known the power of song, the transformational power of song for myself and for others. And I think that singing is very powerful, bringing sound into vibration into our bodies and our metaphorical voice and our literal voices. It's a very powerful instrument. And I know people get told a lot of stuff like they're not supposed to sing, they should just mouth the words, they're tone deaf, all of that stuff. And I personally don't care about any of that. I don't believe in any of that. I'm not interested in fanning the flames of that. I'm really interested in the voice and feeling like everybody has a right and a need to add their voice to the chorus, to the world. So, and I think also in my experience with feeling empowered or working through trauma, I've wanted to kind of drop into my own body, because there's some great books like The Body Keeps the Score, which is around how trauma gets locked into the body. And I think it's also just a place to move stagnation, to move just to move, to know our own vibrancy and our own
Sure.
aliveness. So I wanted to offer this series as a way to touch in, to even slow down and just breathe and check in with our bodies is something that I think we could use more of, especially in high times of stress like we've been at a big level, macro level,
Sure.
right? So this is an opportunity to drop in, slow down, breathe, check in with our bodies, and I'll be leading some exercises in singing and in movement and games and just kind of schluffing. Is that the right word?
Schluffing,
off
yes.
the energy that needs to move along so that the new stuff can come in.
It seems very positive.
Yeah.
It seems really, really positive. So I have to ask though, as a survivor, especially if you're on that journey where you just realize, right, and you're starting to realize that, wait a minute, how much anger was in you at that moment when you realized, hey, this guy's an asshole?
It took, honestly, well, for me, it took me a while to get angry because that I've just been trained to not like anger. I'm not allowed to be angry,
and we
right?
should,
and I'll get punished or lose connection.
Exactly, right.
So it took me a while to get there, but then I felt like in writing this song, Giving Your Crazy Back to You, that was my outlet to let it rip and to purge that all of that toxicity and the crazy making. Oh my God, the system of crazy making that was in place all of those years, and how I got so turned around, and I felt like, no, I'm an amazing, empowered woman. I know who I am, but why can't I feel myself? Why can't I feel like my center, my core, my strength, because I got so broken down little by little by little. And now I know how that happens. I never thought, nobody thinks, oh, I'm going to be in an abusive relationship
Right,
or
yeah.
I'm susceptible to that. And I had worked for a domestic violence agency for 2 years in my early 20s. So I've had all this amazing,
Yeah.
extensive training and thought maybe I'm the last person, right? But like Sherry was saying, it's a very particular process and a slow, kind of like a slow trickle effect. So it took a while for that violence to start to come out with my partner towards me, and then the control and manipulation was just on. So
it's a very psychological situation, more so I think, because when you hear the words domestic violence, right, you think of getting hit, physical violence, you think of that. But I think it's worse, right? To me, it seems worse, this psychological BS that gets thrown out, because that's what breaks your soul down. And that, I can take punches, I can take that will heal. Your heart doesn't heal as quickly.
We tend to hear that from survivors, obviously, right? The physical bruises, certainly not always, right? But they may be what heals first. And it's the old crappy tapes that might play in our head, the echoes of what we've experienced, and then the ways that might be turned on us to like question ourselves and you name it. And that's what, that's what I think having community to try to sort out can be hugely helpful.
Sure.
And then, again, want to just add an exclamation point here to what a gift Kata is providing, because everything you've described about, owning what we need and what we deserve in our lives, that's and being empowered and embodying our voices, that is pretty universal for all humans, right? Because we don't have to strictly be in an abusive relationship to get harsh, toxic messages from our culture.
Oh, yes.
Like you were saying, you can't really sing or. And so Flourish is about, absolutely saying just a big yes to the promise in our lives from all the maybe no's that we've gotten from our culture or a partner. And I mean, I can't wait to hear you perform that song again.
Well, I can't think of a better intro than that.
So true.
So, and you've got a wonderful guitar. Would you mind? Oh, please. Yeah, I'd love to hear this because I love live music anyway, and I'm so envious of people that can play. Yes. I can do Smoke on the Water, which is pretty much it. There's like three notes in that song.
That's great. And I should just say, with sharing my own vulnerability, that I feel very new in a lot of ways on guitar, but that's not going to stop me from trying and sharing it with you all. And I encourage everybody to just follow your heart's passion and your creative flow.
All right. Well, let's go. All right, Kata. This is fantastic.
Okay. And there's an optional sing-along part. So
all right. How are your vocals? You all right? Yeah, okay.
According to Kata, all of us can sing.
Oh,
so
that's
I'm
true.
going with that.
Absolutely. And all you people listening, I expect you to be singing too. Okay, so. Life is precious. Sometimes we gotta read in between the lines. It's easy to take so much for granted, like the very miracle of our own lives. But hey, we're alive. We're alive. We're alive. We're alive. Well, change is constant. Yeah, we try to hold on so tight, but it's in letting go where we really grow. Loving and losing, forgiving is part of the ride. 'Cause hey, you know this part. We're alive. We're alive. We're alive. We're alive. Though this life is precious, it's full of heartbreak along the way. But without any grit, there's no way that the pearl can be made. So let's celebrate this wild ride that we call everyday life. Take a breath with me, 'cause we're alive. Right now we are. We're alive, 'cause we're breathing. We're alive. We're alive. Life is precious. We're alive. We're alive.
Oh man, congratulations! Wow, this is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
That was awesome. That was
So
so good.
sweet.
When
Thank
did you write that?
Last spring.
Last spring. Okay.
Yeah. Woo!
Musical influences. Because I'm gonna. There's a little Joni Mitchell in there. There's a little Jewel in there. There's a little everything in there.
Little adrenaline rush in there. I don't know if you've heard of that band.
And she looks very very flustered right now. You did such a good job.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
That was a phenomenal anthem song to flourishing, to resilience, to just, your spirit is just so, just remarkable. Thank you for that.
Thank
gift.
you.
God,
You know it. And I got to say, I think sometimes it's a fine line of, I really value what it is to look deeply at the trauma, at the dark, at the grit, at the thing that we, don't want to look at because it's uncomfortable or it's going to feel like death or whatever it is, because, and to not get stuck there, but what are the ways that we can really go there and look there? Because like I said, with the grit, without the grit, the pearl is not going to get polished and become what it is. And I feel like the benefit of really going in and doing that hard work is worth it for the shine that comes out afterwards, and that sense of knowing that now, after everything that I've been through, nobody can take that away from me now.
Right.
I think what I went through with my ex and how low I was then. I was at the bottom of the barrel, licking the bottom of that nasty barrel, and I crawled out little by little, and now it feels like this center is really solid and ready to be in the world and to be here with you all talking about this. So,
well, and to speak of that a little bit, because of the experiences you went through, do you think you would have been able to write that song had you not gone through you're creative, you would have been able to write music without good or bad experiences, right? A lot of people will write music based on their experiences. So I have to wonder, would you have been able to write such a beautiful song had you not gone through so much trauma?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because if you listen to some of the great songwriters, I'm a big Beatle fan, so I guess I'll throw Paul and John in there, right? But they wrote based on their feelings and what was going on in their lives and stuff. And it feels like if you've never gone through some hard times, you might not have these songs that are so inspiring. And by the way, positive. Positive. Like I was waiting for like a Alanis Morissette, "You Ought to Know" kind of thing coming out there, because I would feel very, you got to get my anger out and like have a heavy metal rock song or something. But it was such a positive, enlightening song, and it makes me wonder, that could be the gift that you got, with that ability.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that is always to the credit of the individual, whether it's individual survivor or whoever. Like, what do we do with the depth of suffering that we maybe got dealt, right? And not everybody's able to reach a place where they try to bring light back to the world, right? In their lyrics or their art or whatever. And that's understandable too. I mean, for all the reasons, right? Not everybody's able to get to a place in their art or in their lives, but we cherish hearing these kinds of reflections by survivors, and in particular in support groups. Who better sometimes to say the nugget that helps another survivor than somebody who, hey, I lived it, as you said, right? That bottom of the barrel thing. Unless you've been there, you maybe don't have access to that vocabulary even, right? And somebody else. So the language and just sort of the electricity of like touching those nerves of truth sometimes only comes from people who have been there. And that, again, it's such a gift. And when anybody, artist or whoever, and I also agree that everybody's an artist in their heart, whatever way we bring that, to the world, hooray, it's a gift we can bring each other.
Right. And so how much of the programs that are offered this month in particular are about healing? Because it seems like these are great outlets to express yourself in a very healing manner. Because you wrote that song as a way to heal, right? Yeah. So that's why offering these programs it seems like a fantastic opportunity for survivors to really help in their healing process. Is that kind of the intent of some of these?
Honestly, it's a great question, and I would say 1,000% of our aim is always to help people on that, right? Like even if we come and talk about hard topics in the community, right? Really examining things. The intent is healing. Even if we have to go into some really tough spots to get there, the intent is hopefully liberation for all humans from what we're dealt in patriarchy. Every one of us, right? And that's, sort of the mission writ large. But certainly these kinds of events, right? We want whoever feels drawn to them to come and get whatever feels helpful to them in this moment in time and make some connections with other wonderful people, survivors. And we don't really make a distinction between survivors and the community, right? We're all community members, and there's tons of survivors, whether we know that about them or not. But we have some specific things because we do want to just kind of underline for all the amazing survivors and the light they bring the community. We see you, we hear you, we thank you. So some of the events are for survivors, by survivors even, and then some are for the broader community, and that's the bonfire at the end of the month.
Yeah. It seems like, too, that there's, with all the work that Women's Freedom Center does and all the professionals who have that offer their expertise, would you also say that hearing from other survivors is that much more important in some ways? Not, I don't want to say more or less, but it's really a strong thing to hear from other survivors like you today, survivors listening to your story, hearing that song, or somebody who isn't a survivor quite yet, or might be thinking, wait a minute, something doesn't feel right. Hearing from them and hearing from other survivors, how important is that everything's individual. I get that part, but for you specifically, was that another one of those empowering moments to know that, hey, there's other people that I can share my story with, and I'm not going to have to feel this way or that way about sharing my story.
Yeah, I think that was part of the recovery from not feeling so crazy. I think it's similarly like the analogy you gave around AA.
Right.
or going to Al-Anon family groups, that it gives a sense of community and a sense of human experience that takes us out of our own little unique one-to-one relationship with our partner or whoever it is, and to know, oh, these are common patterns, and this is how it happens, and oh, you felt that way too, or that happened to you too, and oh, it gives you a commonality, common language, and again, I think for me it was a place to get traction, to go, okay, I'm not crazy. My sense of reality got super distorted because that was the abuser, my partner's tactic, and now I can begin to rebuild my sense of reality from that place of knowing, thanks to hearing other people's stories, and it gave me a lot of courage and support to keep going and to trust that I'm going to get through this. Because I got to say, being in that, oh my gosh, that was one of the darkest times in my life. And I didn't know if I was going to make it. And I don't underestimate that for people, like it's hard to be alive sometimes.
Well, it sounds like just hearing how many times you actually use the word crazy today.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, okay, well, that must have been something that was the tactic that was being used that, oh, how could you say that about me? You're crazy.
Totally.
Nobody else says that. Look how wonderful I am. Mm-hmm. The community thinks I'm great.
Right. Or if somebody's
closed doors.
If somebody's screaming at you, screaming at you and ripping you apart, and then you say, "Stop screaming at me. You're screaming." And they say, "I'm not screaming."
Oh,
what? Oh, you
right.
get upset because I'm a passionate person.
Yeah.
This is what it's like where I grew up or whatever if somebody's just saying, "No, that's not screaming. That's not abuse." All these things, your sense of reality gets slippery and you don't know what's what for a bit.
And we spoke earlier about how we're starting to see now, we're starting to see progress. Like radio shows like this are starting the progress. We've talked about in the past that the old school is part of the patriarchy, but the old school feeling like I'm not proud of it, but I've heard my grandfather say stuff he should never say. And I did grow up around that sort of mentality, is particularly with men being men and don't be a pansy and, this and that, and the other thing. And, my grandfather came from that generation of women didn't work. Women stayed home. They cooked, they cleaned, to the point where as a boy, I can remember very well. I was 10, 11, 12 years old, 13, somewhere near there. And my grandmother would cook a meal for me and serve me, and I'm thinking, no, I can use the microwave or whatever, but it was that mentality. We've gone past that, luckily, hopefully, it seems like anyway. So I guess my question is, like, your partner, did he even realize? Did he realize? Because I have to think, if somebody's yelling and screaming, you've got to know that that's not a good thing to be doing inside you. And I'm wondering, how could somebody do that to somebody they claim they care about? It's hard to wrap my head around.
Yeah, and I would say,
do they know?
That is an enormous existential question that we could spend.
I know, right?
Right?
I think too much.
No, I mean, it is a spot on, open-ended question,
right.
And could easily and we wouldn't necessarily be. We have individual answers, but every single person who's using harm has whatever their backstory is and whatever their amount of insight or lack thereof may be. Certainly, that's probably something that's worth another conversation.
It's more than just a 5-minute answer.
Well, what I wanted to, and I appreciate the question because it's spot on. It's one for us all to think about in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent? And again, as you said, it's not that long ago that there was still an even more archaic mindset alive and well about sort of gender roles. And thankfully, progress is being made. There's, lots of activism and inspired work happening across the spectrum, right, for social justice causes, and that hopefully are chipping away at that mindset for sure. One thing I wanted to get back to the question about how helpful is it perhaps to hear from other survivors is, I think what, Kata has helped underline here is, and everybody chooses the word that feels okay to them, right? Some folks will use the word victim to describe themselves, survivor, what have you. It's a noun, but it's not the defining noun of obviously who that person is or that experience, because people absolutely manage. I mean, we can't ever unknow what's happened to us, right? We can't ever, but we absolutely can transform to become amazing humans. And I would say, the takeaway nouns here in my experience of kata, and I'm sure the audience too, is again, artist, musician,
right.
coach, soul cheerleader, right? And one noun on a journey of all these stepping stones, or grit, as you said, to create the pearl.
I love that.
Has included that, right? Isn't that
I've
was a
never heard that
brilliant
before.
line
That was
in
awesome.
your
I've
brilliant
never
line in your song? And thank you for the pearls, in this world that that bring that. And yeah, I think that's my takeaway.
Let's talk about your other song.
Oh, yeah.
I want to hear about the other song too. I love that line too. I'm glad you brought that up because I've never heard that before. And boy, is that so accurate.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great, accurate line. Well, tell us about this other song we're about to hear.
Yeah, so this is my, what I would say, recovering from gaslighting song, which was like the story I was saying earlier of feeling this haunting question of why do I feel crazy? Why do I feel crazy in this horrible breakup? So this song was basically me naming the stuff happening in the relationship, naming the tactics that were happening of him, power and control dynamics, manipulation of even the ways that his mom was just telling me to take it. Just let it roll off. Just let it roll off, And I would try to describe these, the tricky thing was, he didn't quote unquote hit me, but he would terrorize me with acts of violence around me to physical objects, right? So it was this thing where I felt like I could never, I'm like, can I call it abuse? Can I call it, what can I call this? I knew that something was wrong, but when I would try to talk about it, nobody,
right.
And I was even scared to name it, right? I became scared because I'm like, oh God, I don't want it to be abuse either in some way, right? Because I love this person.
Was it because you didn't want to upset him? Or was it because you didn't want to be the person that was, quote, a victim?
I think it was more, I really loved him and I really thought that he was a viable partner for me.
Yeah.
So I really loved him. I really loved his family big time. But I think something that was happening is that he would erupt every once in a while in erratic violence, or kind of erratic rages. And I think when that happens, it does something it did something to me where I never knew when that happens. It's like, you never know what you're going to get. You never know who you're going to get. And it could be from we're drinking hot chocolate and everything's peaceable to he's up screaming and ripping me apart into shreds. And I don't know what happened. And if we try to talk about it, there's no logical equation to understand that. So I think it's tricky in the abusive relationship that I was in because it just had that feeling of like, I don't know when the ground's going to drop from under me. And so I think I was scared, like Sherry was saying, it was scared to know how to leave. It was scary to know how to stay. And yet I loved him and I thought it was in a lot of ways a viable relationship. So I kept thinking, and I just have to say he pulled a lot of victim, always about him and his troubles and his trauma from when he was younger. And I think for me as a very empathic person, I thought, oh, well, he's suffering. I gave more space and bailouts for him because of that, because he was so seductive with those manipulations. But then he would never really tend to the damage that he was causing in our relationship.
Right.
And so I think I say in the song, I became a shell of myself under your spell, because there was a lot of smoke and mirrors. It was, and I've never been in something like that before. So I think they're good questions, and it's interesting to look back on that relationship and go, wow, what was going on there?
Well, I can't wait to hear. We're going to hear it right now. And what's the name of the song?
Giving your crazy back to you. I'm giving all your crazy back to you. I'm giving all your crazy back to you. You know that funk, that junk, that gunk that you told me wasn't true. I'm giving all that crazy back to you. You tore me down brick by brick. Your reasoning was so damn slick. relationship. But now I see clearly and I won't stand for it. I'm giving all that crazy back to you. I'm giving all your crazy back to you. You know you had me fooled with the way you always change the rules. I'm giving all that crazy back to you. You were so clever, you only tore me down in the moment when nobody was around. You twisted everything to make it my fault. Even when you were screaming and punching the walls, I'm giving all that crazy back to you. I'm giving all your crazy back to you. You know your games of blame and shame, well, they made me feel insane. I'm giving all your crazy back to you. Your mama told me just let it roll off, so I tried to take it to keep everything calm. But that's not the duty of a woman, never was. Respect me all the way or walk out the door. I'm giving all your crazy back to you. I'm giving all your crazy back to you. You know your hateful rage that you use to keep me in a cage. I'm giving all that crazy back to you. I became a shell of myself under your spell, but brick by brick I've rebuilt myself. I've reclaimed my sense of reality, and now I'm calling you out for abusing me. I'm giving all that crazy back to you. It's not mine. I'm giving all that crazy back to you. I'm done playing nice. All that crazy back to you. I know who I am. Giving all your crazy back to you. I'm giving all that crazy back to you.
And there we go. Wow, bringing, I'm sorry, the title again, Bringing Your Crazy Back
Giving
to
Your Crazy Back to You.
It's such a great song. It's so talented. Thank you so much. You know, right before the song, there was something that you mentioned that I picked up on. Your ex's mother was supportive of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I picked, isn't that interesting? Because I mentioned my grandfather and the attitude. So it's a generation. Is it generational? Sometimes it seems like it's really generational. How somebody could be supportive of, somebody who's mistreating somebody else is astonishing to me, mother or not. You know, I've got a little boy, and if he dared ever, cause any kind of trouble, I guess is the way to put it, I would not support him. I'd say, look, I'm sit him down. So it's astonishing to me. Mm-hmm. Well, and you said you loved his family too.
Totally. Well, and I think that's a good place to put plant a little stick or something to come back to, because witnessing that in his family dynamic, I mean, family system, right? That's a family system in a cultural system and a generational system, things getting passed down. And I can see the ways that his mom had suffered some abuses too, right? And then here's her baby boy.
Sure.
So I think it's a complicated dynamic,
Sure.
and I think it's really easy to say, oh, I would never do that, or I would call that person out. And yet I think what it's done for me is it's making me question in my life as an ongoing question, who am I tending to, or what is healthy here? And to not just think, oh, I would be the kind of person that would, or whatever, call
Sure,
that out, or
sure.
say, I'll never tolerate that, because I'm sure that there are ways that I'm tolerating or enforcing inappropriate behaviors and different dynamics. But it's something I want to work on. And I think like I said, it's an ongoing cultivation to maintain health and to check the ways that maybe we're regurgitating stuff from the culture,
Sure.
patriarchal or
And that's why it's so difficult for the change to happen. It's slower,
Right.
but luckily it's starting to. It's a slow thing. It's going to. It requires a lot of work, and we're all
intending
doing the best we can. I've got one. We got to start wrapping up. Believe it or not, we're almost to the end here. But I did have one question for you, and for survivors or possible survivors listening, that how are your do you have health? I mean, forgive me if this is too personal, but relationships today. Have you had, because of the experiences you went through, have your relationships since been difficult as far as seeing certain little things in somebody else and getting scared, saying, well, wait a minute, I've seen this before, I am going to back off? And has that made has it made new relationships challenging?
I think that I feel like there are opportunities actually for me in my relationship since that one. And they're really good opportunities for me to tend to myself first and to check that part that can easily go into self-betrayal or people pleasing, right? And to go, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. And to somehow, for some reason, be taking care of other people's needs always first before my own. I'm really learning to repattern that. And so these have been great opportunities in relationships to work on caretaking myself first, what I need and want, and to risk that maybe that'll cause turbulence or a disturbance or disconnection, right? But I think it's actually it feels like the relationship I was in before has set me on this important recovery journey to keep moving towards health and to keep learning what healthy self-advocacy looks like. And I fall off that wagon, and then I get to forgive myself and go, okay, next time. And I'm totally learning, like it's totally possible, right? And I think it's easy to think we should be there, we should be at the end goal and be empowered and it's perfect forever. But I think it's more for me the day-to-day baby step hero's journey that is so fruitful, and I can go, yes, I said no. When I almost wanted to say yes, I said no. It's a big thing to celebrate, right?
Look at her physical reaction. Her aura changed. It changed. And that was such a great thing to see. I love that. We've got to wrap up. I hate to say that. We got to wrap up. Let's recap everything one more time, Sherry, if you don't mind. Thank you so much, by the way, Kata,
Thank you
for
so
being
much.
here.
My pleasure.
Oh,
absolutely.
So excited. I hate to, not to interrupt, but it's like I had fun. It's like I almost feel like I shouldn't say I had fun, but I did. It was a great experience, and it was enlightening for everyone, I hope. And so let's recap the opportunities for this month.
Absolutely. And just want to say thank you for the chance to have this conversation. And Kata, thank you for absolutely illuminating this conversation. So spot on. And we're delighted to have Kata joining us for these events. So again, for folks, if you have any questions after the show, by all means, give us a call. The first event is happening March 30th. And again, that's the Survivors Outreach Collaborative. All genders are welcome. And that's if you want to add your voice to our activism. It's happening from 6 to 7:30 on Zoom. So give us a call for the link. The number again is 257-7364. The phenomenal, inspiring 2-part workshop series that Kata is facilitating is called Flourish. It's happening two Thursday nights, April 7th and 14th. Also from 6 to 7:30 on Zoom. All genders welcome. Give us a call again for the link there. And that's 257-7364. And the last event, and again, folks can call us, and it's also going to be in the Reformer, but our Solidarity Bonfire, it's it's really, we want to honor the resilience and the heart of all allies committed to social justice. And so, whether you work for racial or gender justice, support refugees, protect nature, teach respect and kindness to kids, anything, right? Especially in these challenging times. We also want to thank you for that amazing work. And so we are inviting you to an upbeat gratitude gathering, really, as we welcome back spring and reflect on the personal, the collective healing power of activism itself. And that bonfire is happening Thursday, April 28th. From 6 to 7:30 on the beautiful campus of the Austin School in Brattleboro. Give us a call if you've got questions. There's going to be music, some readings, really informal activities, and a chance for you to speak out too, or read something if you'd like about what keeps you inspired. And it's also perfectly fine. You're super welcome also just to come share in some spring cheer, soup, solidarity, and just a good evening, kind of a booster shot to our activist spirits during these really tough times. So everybody is welcome. And again, thank you.
You can tell she's very good at she's one of my favorite people on the planet. She's so good at her job. Thank you very much, Sherry. Thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you so much.
And by all means, if you're listening to the podcast, share, keep sharing. Sunny, share, do whatever. Just share. Because the more people, whether you're a survivor or not, whether you think you're not touched by any of these topics, you're probably wrong. So, if you're listening, if you enjoyed it this hour, please share and